to start with, and I've had a couple of chats this morning already, you're in that time now where you're thinking about choosing the right school. The reason we're running this session now is because applications opened for the schools on the 1st of September, and then the admissions process deadline is the 15th of January. So this is the kind of term, this autumn term is the time for you to be choosing. Some of you might have an idea, you might have older siblings, you might have friends that know local schools, you might have an idea of schools, but these are some of the things to think about as you're making that decision as to which schools you put onto your admissions list. So the first thing I would say is picking your priorities. Now, when you're thinking about a school, you're thinking about the school that's right for your child. You are the experts of your children. You know what kind of school would suit your particular child, which could be different to your neighbours, it could be different to your relations or friends, but thinking about the priorities for your little one. What do you want for them? What kind of size do you want? Are you wanting a school that's got lots of different classes, or are you wanting a kind of quite smaller school? Thinking about the locality, how far do you want to travel? Are you willing to travel a little bit more for a school that's quite right, or is it really important to you that it's 2 minutes down the road? The values of the school, what does the school stand for? What's important at that school? Thinking about results, is a priority for you the standard of results in that school? We'll come back to that a little bit later as well. Pastoral care, so the caring side of the school, is that important? Lots of other things as well. Diversity and representation. When you look around a school, do you want your child to feel represented within the staff? So that's something to think about as well. Outdoor space, is your child somebody that loves running around and likes a field or a bigger space area? That's something to consider. Extracurricular activities, faith schools. So there's loads of things to think about, and one of those might be the priority that stands out to you, and the other ones you're not kind of worried about. And so that's kind of the thing to be thinking about when you're looking at the schools and visiting, is have your priorities for your little one in your mind. The second thing I think about is cutting through the stats. So I mentioned results. There are lots of ways to Google schools and find out about them, and you'll get lots of numbers and stats and ratings. There are league tables, results, Ofsted reports. While all of these can be really useful background and context to find out a little bit more about the school, they're not always the best way to judge whether that school's right for you. They might be giving you a really great picture, but that might not be reflective. For instance, Ofsted reports. If a school has been given outstanding, that sounds really great, but they may have been given it outstanding 12 years ago, and they haven't yet been re-inspected. And so it is worth taking into consideration, but do really think about the experience and what you see when you go and see the school. So always Ofsted reports, league tables, very useful. Also high results, that is always a good thing to see with school. You want your children to achieve academically, but it doesn't always automatically say that that is the right school for your child, because there are all those other priorities to think about. So that's just, keep that in the back of your mind as you're reading around those. The next thing I would say is thinking about arranging visits to schools. They're really, really important. I would absolutely recommend visiting any school that you choose. So on your admissions form, you can enter up to 6 primary schools. That's right, Alicia, isn't it? And you may get any of those, depending on the availability. So whichever primary schools you put on there, do make sure you've at least visited them to see, just in case you don't get your first choice. Make sure that you know the schools that you've put on there. You don't have to put 6, but it is recommended to put as many as possible so that you've got a really good choice. Most schools run open days, which again are a great opportunity, but if possible, see if you can go during a normal school day, because that's what you want to see. You want to see normal life. And so do go to the open days, and while you're there, just say, can I pop back for half an hour at another time? You know, you can ask that. Feel free to ask that. And schools are really keen for you to come and see them. Schools are doing a brilliant job. They're really proud of what they're offering. And we had Mr. Slater from Alan Edwards here earlier. He's really keen for you to come along, and they'll be really flexible, because we've got lots of primary schools here, and they would all love your child to go there. And so you can choose, and you can ask for those things to kind of get that impression of them on a normal day. Other parents' views is something I would also think about. So if you do go to an open day, or you do go and visit a school, you do go and visit a school during their normal day, try and go early after drop off, kind of the start of the day, or at the end of the day, just before pick up, because then you get to see parents whose children are there every day, and maybe you don't know anyone that goes to that school. And so it's really handy to be able to just have that chat. Oh, you know, how's your child enjoying it? Or what year are they in? What experience have they had? Just kind of getting that sense from other parents. Also, you might have friends who have connections with the school, or relatives. Mumsnet is also, mums is great for dads as well. You can put in Mumsnet the name of the school, and there's often people have had experiences, or might give you a bit of background. And if you're feeling like you really want to have a look, Ofsted Parent View is a questionnaire online. So you just Google it, Ofsted Parent View, and I'll give you this afterwards, this slide, so you kind of see what I've put down, and you can Google it, and you can look at the different years, and it will give you feedback. Not all parents will will answer on those, so you just have to take that into consideration, that not all, it won't be a massive number, but it does give you, again, another picture of what people are saying about the school. And then the last thing, when you're considering your schools, be realistic. And this is not at all not saying high aspirations and, you know, a real big vision, but do look at the school's admissions policy, do look at their prospectus, and on your list, so for instance, faith schools, on admissions policies on faith schools, there's normally quite explicit factors they will take into consideration when looking at your application. And if you don't, for instance, go to that local place of worship regularly, then they may not consider your application. So it's not worth putting that down if that's not. So that's what I mean about being realistic. Some schools have really explicit admissions policies. So it's just worth looking at. And I would advise you to, in your list of 6, always include a school that's really close to you, so that if you don't get your first choice, you're more likely to get a school that's close to you out of your other choices. So bear in mind the schools that are really on your doorstep, and kind of include one of those, even if it's not the one that you'd absolutely want. Put that, the one that you want, as your first choice, but do consider ones that are local. So they're the aspects and the things I would think about when you're choosing the schools to go and visit. You can visit as many schools as you like. There is no limit on how many schools you go and visit. And I would always say, make that time, take an hour off if possible, to go and visit the school before you make your decision on what's going to go onto your list. Any questions that we have, I won't ask them now because we'll keep them for the end, but do kind of think about any questions that you might have around that. So when you have chosen the schools that you're going to go and visit, the next thing I would think about is, before your visit, think about those priorities that you know for your child, what's really important for you when you go into a school. Because sometimes when you go into school, it's all a bit overwhelming. You kind of follow somebody around, they're giving you a tour, you walk around, you go, oh, lovely, oh, that looks nice, oh, that's great. But think about the questions that you might want to ask. And I would probably have 3 questions in your mind that you write them down, you know, that you know, these are the priorities, these are the things I want to know. Some questions that I would suggest you could think about are here. So, and there's a reason behind some of these, and this is kind of what you want to think about when you're asking your questions. And again, no limit to any questions. Go with 40 questions. You know, that's what they're there for. They're there to answer your questions. So, you know, take as many questions as you like, and if you need more time to ask your questions, ask if you can have a chat separately to the tour. Again, ask what you need. If you go on the tour and you don't get a chance, you could just say to the deputy or the assistant head showing you around, this has been really useful. I've got a couple more questions. Could I stay and kind of sit and have a little chat with you afterwards, or make another time to see them? So make sure you do find out what you want to know, rather than kind of feeling like you're getting flowed along with the tour. So how often do the children use the outdoor area? The reason I would ask about that is because you'll get a little clue from that as to what the day might look like. So in reception, which your children will be going into, there is different ways of delivering reception. And what the ideal kind of thing you're looking for is free flow. Children can access the outdoor area, the indoor area. They have a mixture of experiences within their day. That's what kind of you're looking for. You want those children to be exploring and using the space. So that's just a good in to finding out a little bit about what their day. You could be more explicit and ask, what does the school day look like for reception children? And they'll go into a little bit more detail. How long have the staff been working here? Or we talked to that person. I asked Mr. Slater earlier, I said, oh, how long have you been at Alan Edwards? And he said, so long. And actually, when the staff has been there for a long time, that tells me something. That says to me either that we've got really happy staff who love working here and are really committed and enjoy and are passionate about that school. That's great. You want staff that they've been there a long time that really want to be there. If the answer is, oh, too long, oh my gosh, then you do get another clue. You think, oh, why are they not happy? Is this, you know, what's going on here? So asking those questions, you can do it in as a part of a chat, but these all tell you something a little bit more that you're kind of listening for. Another question you might ask, if it's one of your priorities that you've thought about, is how are children extended and challenged? So you want to think, if one of your priorities is really kind of stretching your child, and you know your child and you know that they need that, you might want to find out about that. On the other side, you also might want to ask, how are children with additional needs supported? So that gives you a little bit of a kind of a consideration about individual children. And are we just looking at the whole class, or are we thinking about the needs of the individual children? Are the school going to be thinking about the needs of your child? Is there an open door policy? We were talking earlier about a nursery. Often you have all the time in the world to talk. They take the time to talk to you, answer all your questions. That's one of the things you want to know. You want to know, if I've got something to ask, or if I want to talk to somebody, is the teacher going to make time to talk to me? Is the head teacher going to make time to talk to me? When you're asking the questions again, you can also get a clue as to how they might approach you asking questions in the future. So if when you're asking questions, the staff are really keen to answer your questions and really go into the answer with you and give you that time, that gives you a clue that in the future, if you're asking questions, if they're kind of dismissing it and too busy to answer the question, then that also gives you a bit of a clue. So that's something to think about as well. The school ethos, you can kind of get that kind of description of what's important to the school. Ethos just means values, a mission. What does the school believe in? It's one of those kind of school words that is used a lot. Ethos, and just means that. And then, what's your take on bullying? You could ask a specific question about how they approach behaviour and discrimination and bullying in that school. School lunch, if that's something that you know your child is has a challenge at eating certain things or in certain ways or at certain times, or takes a long time eating, kind of what does school lunch look like? Because that gives you as well. And ask to see the lunchroom. That's quite helpful to ask, so you can see that. So that is just 10 questions that you could ask, but you might have your own questions. But as I said, before you go, just think about which 3 are really important to me, and do I need a bit more time to ask them? Next thing to think about, if I can get onto my, there we are. Is that going to go? Yep. So keep an eye and ear out for. So as you're walking around, you might have your questions, but these are the kind of thing that you might want to be thinking about as you're walking around. So you might not ask these, but you're asking yourself these. Does the school match up with the prospectus? You probably looked at the website before you went. A prospectus is a brochure about the school. It's often on the website, or you can go into the school and ask for a paper copy. Does it match up with what you've seen about the school? Are children used to show parents round? That's really interesting as well. Lots of schools do that. I used to do that in my school. Year 5 and year 6 is the older children would do the tours, and because then you get a child idea of what it's like to do at school, and you hear that. So that's something. If children are doing that, kind of tells you how the schools value the children in that way. This is I always say this to people: go and look at the toilets. So as you dive past, they'll say, "Oh, there's the toilet." Just have a little look. Have a look at the paintwork around the school. Is it clean? Is it well kept? Because that kind of tells you about the upkeep and the care of the building, and that tells you again about the value that's placed in the school. So that is sounds a bit strange, but if the toilets are nice, you're probably thinking the rest of the school is quite well looked after. Is the work on display well presented? Again, that's another feeling. So children's work everywhere. Does it look valued? Does it look celebrated? Does it look that it's important to the teachers and the staff that the children's work is presented? But also, are there all sorts of abilities presented on the wall, or is it just the beautifully written, absolutely immaculate work on the wall? If that tells you again something about the school and what they value. And when I'm telling you all of these, I'm not saying that some are wrong and some are right. I'm saying that for your child, you decide what's right for them. So thinking about how the work is presented, what are your impressions of the head? Do you meet the head? Are they friendly? Or the deputy head? Are you speaking to the senior leadership team? Do they have time to talk to you? Are they around? Is it natural and friendly, or is it more formal? Again, neither wrong, but will tell you the approach that the school takes. How the teachers, that's what you're looking at as well. You're looking at how, when you walk into the classroom, how are the teachers relating to the children, how are the children relating to each other? What does the feel? We talked about this earlier. I talked about this earlier with someone earlier as well. You feel something when you go into a school. Your child will feel that as well. So that's what you're kind of getting, that sense of all of these things. Is the general atmosphere. And there sounds like a lot there. And these are just hints and tips and thoughts from me, but you will come up with your own questions. This will all come pretty naturally when you walk into the building. You'll get a sense of it, and you'll notice these things. But these are just kind of a couple of tips on what I think would be really valuable to take away with you. And again, I've got these on this sheet so you can kind of take that away with you. So again, any questions we can do afterwards. So you've thought about which schools you might want to visit, you've visited them, and then you go to the application process. Now, the application process is via the Lambeth e-admissions website, and I'm going to do an overview of the whole process. Then we're going to have a little look at the website, but we're not going to go through the whole website process together, because afterwards there's an opportunity for you to look at the website process on laptops and have a think through it. And then you can go away and have a go. And then if you have difficulties with it or something that you're not sure of, I will give you ways to get support with that. So, an overview of the whole process. As I mentioned, you've got to apply online by the 15th of January next year. So in order to do that, you navigate the admissions process. you have to create yourself an account. You confirm that account on an email address, and then you complete what is known as a CAF for short, but is actually a common admissions form. And so you fill that form in with all of you and your child's information. What's handy about it is you can save it and come back to it. So you can start it, think, oh, I need some more information, or I need to do that next day, or I need to give it a bit more time, save it, and then re-enter it once you go into your account. When you are filling the form, once you've done all the information, you're going to be asked for 2 proofs. You're going to be asked a proof of address, and the address is where your child is living at the moment, even if it's temporary accommodation. There is a way to change information if you're moved out of temporary accommodation within that process. So it's where you're living at the moment. And you need 2 documents that prove that address. And there is a link, which I'll show you later, which tells you what kind of proof you can use. And then you can scan it and attach it. Now, this is a question I have for Alicia. When you scan, can you take a photo and send the photo if you can? Great. So that's much more useful than a scan. You can just photograph it and send it alongside it. Or if that's too difficult for your circumstances, you can take a paper copy down to the City Centre, but you have to book an appointment to do that. So for all of us with our phones at the moment, it's much easier just to take a photo and send. The second proof that you're asked for is the child's date of birth. That's because obviously this cohort going into reception are within a certain date range. And you will be asked to attach proof of that. It could be birth certificate, passport, ID card, NHS card. It might be a prescription that's got your child's date of birth on it. And again, you can photograph it and send it. Then, depending on your situation and what's happening with your child, you may have some additional information, and that might be something medical, it might be something social, it might be that the child that you're applying for is looked after or was previously looked after. And so, or you're applying out of cohort. If anyone is here is applying out of cohort, you can have a bit more of a detailed chat about that later. Out of cohort means that your child is slightly older or younger than the year group you're applying for, and it's exceptional circumstance. So it's not a usual circumstance, and there's a lot of process around that. And then number 5, this was for those specific schools that have those particular criteria, they might ask you to fill out a supplementary information form, or SIF for short. And that is, for instance, a faith school. It might be evidence that you've been attending that place of worship for a certain amount of time. So some schools have that, but not all schools, and it is mostly faith schools. And then lastly, as I mentioned, what you put on your form needs to be accurate for the moment that you're filling it out and submitting it. If in the time between then and the 15th of January, or even before after 15th of January, before you found out your school, you can inform the admissions team as soon as possible of that change, and there is a way of doing that. Just to say, on the admissions website, one of the first things you see, and I'll show you in a minute, is a tab that gives you an information guide. It's a PDF, and so you can look at it on your laptop or your phone, or you can go to the library and print it off. But in the back, so it's got information about this process in the front, and in the back, it's got all the school's contact details, including whether they need supplementary information from you. So you can check that on here. It tells you what type of school they are, if they're a religious school, and if they need extra information. So that's a handy little guide that's on the website. Again, if we have any questions, we'll keep those for a few minutes, because I'm just going to now, and I know there's lots of information, but again, I'm going to give you the handouts so you can kind of refresh yourself. And then when we finish this bit at the front, we've got lots of time just to talk and come back to those questions individually. So let's have a little look, if you haven't already, at the admissions website. So just going to click, and then I think I need to end my slideshow. Oh, what can we see? There we are. So this is the page. If you follow the link, the e-admissions link, or you Google it, this is what you'll get to. So there's quite a few steps to go through before you actually get to the right page. So this is the front page. You want primary school admissions for the next academic year. There's lots to choose from, but that's the one that we want, the one in the top in the middle. Then this is where you get some extra information. So applying, that's the one we're going to press now to find out what happens next, applying for primary school. This tab, I mentioned it earlier, tells you what type of proof, address, date of birth, what you need to provide. So that gives you a whole list of acceptable documents. This one gives you advice if you're applying for a school in another borough. If you live in Lambeth, you need to fill out the Lambeth application form, but there is extra information if you're out of borough, if you're actually applying for a school in Southwark or Wandsworth or a neighbouring borough. We're going to click on this one because this is what most of us are going to be using. So lots of information on here. You can scroll down, or you can navigate by skipping to the supplementary information form I mentioned. You can skip to there. The school admissions team, you can contact them and get some information from them. We want to find the application form, so we check that our children are born between these dates, and we're looking for reception. And then there's a bit of information. Here's the guide. So this guide here is this brief guide to starting primary school. So that's useful to download as well. Tells you a little bit of information about what you might need to know before you apply. Again, directs you to the different borough. And then this is where we get to the form. So apply for an infant primary school place, and it takes you to this portal. It looks a bit different to the website. It's the e-admissions portal where you can do everything you need to do. If you've never done it before, you might have done it from another child. So then you might already have an account. But if this is your first time of applying for school, you need to register. There are lots of steps, but they do tell you each time what you need to do. So I did this yesterday and just read it, and it guided me through it. So then you create a new account. Once you've created that account, you do need an email address, but the email address will then confirm it, and then they'll have the questions: name, date of birth, then you'll have all those questions we talked about that they're going to ask you in a form, and you can save and return to it. I'm not going to go through the whole form because it's quite long and quite detailed, but that's the journey to get to the form, which I think is probably the most important bit, because when you get to the form, it's quite clear what it's asking you. And if you're not sure about something, you can click the little I and it will give you a little bit more information. So for instance, here it's telling you it has to be where a current postcode where you live, and that's all the way through. I'm a Crown servant. I have no idea what that means. What do Crown servants do? I think probably none of us are Crown servants. Sounds quite official. So that's the process for getting into the application form. Once you get there, I think you will be able to navigate it. If you have difficulties with it, we can support you. The admissions team can support you, and I will give you some more, signpost you to more avenues for support. Last thing I'm just going to talk through before we get on to the question and answers is the timeline. So we're at this end at the moment. we are in the window between when the application's opened and when the application deadline is. So we're in this window where we do the visiting and the applying. Then once the application deadline has passed on the 15th of January, you've got quite a wait until you find out where they've been given, what school they've been given. And just to let you know, the Lambeth School Admissions Team do not decide whether you can go to a school or not. The schools decide that using their own admission process. So once Lambeth have collected all of the applications, they all get sent out to the schools or the particular department of that academy trust or foundation school. The governors decide. Community schools have their own process. So they then look at it and they don't know whether you're first or second choice. They don't get told, oh, this people were you were their third choice, this people you were their first choice. They just get told that you would like to go there, and then they use their admissions process to decide, looking at siblings, looking at distance, looking at their policies, for instance, faith schools, and then they make a decision whether they can offer you a place or not. Then on National Offer Day, you will get told with a text that if you signed up for a text, that you can log in and have a look and see what school your child's been given. Then on the 2nd of May, that's the acceptance deadline. So if you get given the school that you're really happy with, you can, and you know a lot about, then you just accept it. If it's a school you didn't actually manage to visit and you don't really know much about it, go and visit, go and see it and have a look and think about it. And then we would recommend, and Lambeth would recommend, that you accept the school that you are given. If you are really, really, really not happy after you've been to look at it, you can appeal. But if you don't accept it, you may be in a position where when you get to September, your child doesn't have a school place. So accept it, so you know they'll definitely go somewhere, and then you can make your appeal, and it doesn't affect your appeal if you've accepted the place. And then your appeal can last, and then you can put yourself on the waiting list for the school that you did want. And I had children that start at school, and then they're 6 weeks later, a term later, the school that they was really close to, they really, really wanted, came up, and they just moved schools. It's not ideal, it's not what you really want to happen, but that is the situation that may happen. But always, I would say, accept it, so you've got a definite place, and you might end up loving the school, because you're not always going to know about what your child's going to, how your child's going to experience it. Again, I had children that started, it wasn't their first choice. They came, they loved it, never went anywhere, were there for 7 years. So that might happen as well. And then while we're all here, which is they start school in September, and then that's the starting date will vary for different schools.